There's a well-known saying that goes, always give the hardest job to the laziest person because they'll find the easiest way to do it. What is the best real-life example to this you have seen? I used to process HSA claims around 10 plus years ago. One system we had to use back then was an old-as-hell terminal program that took 4 line items per page. That's it. For a usual claim, no big deal. Not too hard to keep track of things over 2 or 3 pages for a longer claim. Most fit in one. However, we had the dreaded shoebox claims. This was the person who saved up every receipt all year in a metaphorical shoebox and sent everything in, once a year, to empty their account. We hated them. Dozens or hundreds of line items totaling thousands of dollars. Just because you only have $500 in your HSA doesn't mean we get to stop there. If you sent $4,000 in receipts, we gotta account for it all. Totally killed your numbers for the day, and they track claims per hour religiously. The main issue was double-checking that everything added up right when you were done entering it. At 4 items a page, it took forever to tally, so I made an Excel sheet. It was laid out so I could enter every single line, then run a Marco that would calculate the needed totals, and dump all the text to a text file formatted exactly so I could select 4 items at a time, and paste them directly into the terminal window from the default start and cursor position, and every field would fill in automatically. Copy, paste, next, copy, paste, next, copy, paste, next, etc., etc. It easily halved my entry times with way less work. Finding any typos was much easier. I just had to lick a 1-column organized sheet instead of scrolling through God knows how many pages of terminal text. It was great. I showed it to my manager so the rest of my team could use it. She was horrified I would use something like that, as no human was double-checking as they went along. This despite demonstrable improvements to my error rates and large claims after I started using it. She ordered me to stop using it and forbid anyone in her team from automating any part of their job at all. I kept using it for all the 2 months I stayed there after that. I had some of the highest claim per hour numbers and lowest error rates on her team. I never developed any more tools for them. Screw her. She believes computers can't do her job. She thinks you created a threat to her job, not a tool to save time. Story 2. I once was a temp at a tiny office in a construction site in around 2003. I was only there for one day while a regular person was on some training. They sat me down and told me that I just needed to copy all these numbers from one program to another, so I selected them, hit Control-C and Control-V. They stared at me. Turns out about 60% of this woman's time had been spent manually typing numbers from one place to another. There are way too many people who think computers are just typewriters with a bunch of weird extra crap on them. Story 3. I worked in a CNC shop. There would be a pile of jobs that needed to be done for the month. Some took days to run while others were generally quick. The record for jobs done in one day was 8. What I did was look through all the jobs and organize them by setup, meaning every job has a setup time. It can take an hour to get all the tooling together, setting up the cutting table and setting the part square to the table so the machine can gauge where the part is, so when I insert the code into the machine, it can run flawlessly and drill, mill, tap, whatever within a literally hair measurement for every single job. Majority of parts use standard tooling, and I have an automatic tool changing with 20 pockets. Long story short, I figured out how to line up the jobs so they all have the same setup. Blew the record out of the water with 30 jobs done in one day, saving the company tens of thousands in work hours. All because I didn't feel like doing all the setups that day. Story 4. I worked a summer at a mortgage company as an assistant to the underwriters. My only job was printing documents and then hole-punching them to put in folders. They had a super fancy Xerox printer that basically did my entire job for me, but the underwriters at this company didn't know how to click through printer settings to make the machine hole-punch as it was being printed. I showed them how to do it and they resisted it super hard. Like, they didn't trust us? I don't know. So I got to keep my job, but what was supposed to take me all day literally took me about 20 to 30 minutes first thing in the morning. So they started assigning me real tasks, and even offered to keep me on to eventually become an underwriter too, because I was so sharp, i.e. I knew how to use the very expensive printer they already had. I was just about to start grad school, so I had to politely decline, but I'm pretty sure they didn't hire someone to replace me when I left. Story 5. Maybe not the most impressive story, but I thought it was a great sidestep of effort nonetheless. A coworker of mine had to get rid of a smaller junk fiberglass boat with no trailer. Our other coworkers are telling him how much time and money he's going to need to spend to get rid of it, and he's just saying, "Oh, is that so?" He took off one day and sat down in his lawn chair with a cooler of beer. That day was garbage day. Inevitably, the trash guy rolls up. He hands each of them a cold beer and says, "Hey boys, got $50 for each of you if you help me out real quick." They fed the entire 12-foot boat into the packer, crushing 2 feet at a time. Story 6. I used to have to make 2 contracts for every person I brought on a traveling training team. I said 2 contracts were stupid and made them into 1. Sent it to our lawyers and they approved it. Still, it took me too goddamn long to update each contract with different names, pay rates, and dates. Went on r/Excel and found out how to make a mailer list, and hours of work takes me 10 minutes. I didn't tell anyone this though, so I just take my time. Then I had to make floor maps for restaurants to send to the company that puts them into our scheduling program. Well, all of our restaurants are cookie cutter, so I just use Paint to piece them together rather than make all of them each time. I'm freaking Picasso with Microsoft Paint. Then they wanted me to use Excel to keep track of training teams. One of my coworkers uses Smartsheet and loves to teach people things, so I jump on Smartsheet with her and she shows me around. Way easier and easier publishing it so that people can see the teams but not mess up any info. Using forms to not have to ask them 30 questions that auto-populate my Smartsheet. Sharing it with payroll so they never have to reach out to me. Templates on Outlook, tons of stuff. I basically took a lot of my job. Said damn that there has to be an easier way, just Googled things and spent maybe an hour learning something that will save me many hours in the future. I always tell people to just Google things. They say, I don't know what to Google. And I say, whatever your problem is, just Google it the exact same way you'd say it to me. And when they Google Excel things that make this do that, they're shocked that they find their answer. Story 7. Worked as a cashier during the holiday season back when I was 16. The supermarket was selling drinks by the boxes, and at the time, we only had barcode scanners that were at the front of the computer. No gun-type scanners existed. I was lazy and didn't want to carry boxes up to the scanner, so I politely asked my customers if I could carve out the barcode from their box to scan and keep. Some agreed, some didn't want to, but eventually I managed to amass all the barcodes needed, labeled them and kept them in a file for easy reference. Apparently some other cashier got green-eyed at my smart move and complained to the chief cashier, who probably lectured me on BS alert, how it's dangerous for me to scan such barcodes as I might scan the wrong things. She told me to throw it all away and carry the boxes like I was meant to. I mean, I was young, so I could, but the other cashiers were older and some were elderly and needed the customers themselves to help carry the boxes to the scanner. But whatever, I guess jealousy trumps common sense. Dang, that was brilliant in your report. And many stores used to do an official barcode book, so I don't see the problem with the idea of it. They should have asked you to create more, not toss yours, all because people are afraid of change. Hey, if you're digging these stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Story 8. A few years ago, my mom was tasked with fixing my grandparents' toilet while we were visiting for the holidays. The toilet reservoir was constantly filling and running, and thus flooding the bathroom because the buoy arm wasn't lifting high enough from the water in the reservoir to switch off the water flow. My mom, who's normally a very practical person, had been tackling the issue for hours. She was pretty distraught, thinking we would have to order a new buoy arm, maybe even a new sensor, or switch and pull the whole assembly apart to replace everything. She was planning out a trip to Lowe's and pricing things out when I walked in. I took one look at it and bent the metal arm the buoy was attached to, down, so the arm had a slight upward curve. The buoy still reached the same level in the reservoir, but registered in the sensor as higher because of the curve in the arm. Problem solved. Rangers lead the way. I watched it dawn on her what I had done, and she just looked at me like I had a third eye and said, "You little jerk! I've been getting my bum kicked by this thing for 4 hours and you fix it in 4 freaking seconds?" She was very happy I saved her from more work and spending more money. She calls me her little toilet engineer from time to time. I work on aircraft. It's mildly demeaning. Story 9. Worked in a huge hotel by the airport. We had a layover with over 400 people. I think we were 3 employees. They had a buffet for dinner and then left to go to bed since it was 1 or 2 a.m. Rule was, we should always go to the room and pick up as many plates as we could and then bring them to the cleaner. It took for ages and I wanted to go home. I decided to roll out the cart and collect the plates and put them on the cart. Guests were seeing it and started pulling their plates in the car when they left. All of a sudden, hundreds of people cleaned up their own stuff. Duty manager saw it and thought he would blast me, since the hotel was a 5-star place. He just looked at me, smiled, and said, "That's why I like to hire lazy people. They think of ways to finish work faster." Story 10. During my internship, my professor gave me line graphs made on paper and asked me to find the coordinates by drawing horizontal and vertical lines. It would have taken hours, if not days. I thought to myself, I couldn't be the first one who's lazy AF. So I Googled it and found the school free-to-use software, Web Digitizer. Step 1, scan the graph. Step 2, mark the X and Y axes in the picture. Step 3, grab a beer because you got the nicest freaking graph that you can have drawn by yourself in a million years. My professor was so happy she asked me to document the method and mail it across the entire department. And yes, I did share my original method with my professor and the entire department. 1, she was a really supportive professor and I wanted to return her favors, even if this software might have been the tiniest help to her work. 2, the original developer of this software made it available online for free. He could have made it a paid service, and believe me, researchers would have paid because it is that good. But he kept it free for all of us to use, and it was my responsibility to share his work as much as I could. Knowing professors, they're just happy with anything that makes tedious research easier. If you just find them a better solution that already exists, they'll still be very happy. Story 11. Be nice to your build engineers. They know how to take the easy road. Okay, so our build engineers left for another company. The dude was literally living inside the terminal. You know, that type of guy who loves Vim, creates diagrams in Dot, and writes wiki posts in Markdown. If something, anything, requires more than 90 seconds of his time, he writes a script to automate that. So we're sitting here looking through his legacy. You're gonna love this. A coworker sends a text message late at work to his wife, apparently, automatically picks reasons from an array of strings, randomly, runs inside a cron job. The job fires if there are active SSH sessions on the server after 9 p.m. with his login. Kumar scans the inbox for emails from Kumar, a DBA at our clients, looks for keywords like help, trouble, sorry, etc. If keywords are found, the script SSHs into the client server and rolls back the staging database to the latest backup. Then sends a reply. No worries, mate. Be careful next time. Another cron job that is set to specific dates, sends automated emails like not feeling well or gonna work from home, etc. Adds a random reason from another predefined array of strings. Fires if there are no interactive sessions on the server at 8:45 a.m. And the Oscar goes to coffee.sh. This one waits exactly 17 seconds, then opens an SSH session to our coffee machine. We had no freaking idea the coffee machine is on the network. Runs Linux and has SSHD up and running, and sends some weird gibberish to it. Looks binary. Turns out this thing starts brewing a mid-sized half-calf latte and waits another 24 seconds before pouring it into a cup. The timing is exactly how long it takes to walk to the machine from the dude's desk. Story 12. There's a story that I've heard a few dozen times about a toothpaste company that had accidentally sent out cases of the product that had a few empty single boxes of toothpaste. The company had endeavored not only to rectify their mistake, but to ensure they did not repeat it. They hired an engineer company that designed a scale and alarm shutdown system. If an empty carton was passed down the production line, klaxons would be triggered, and a full stop would initiate until the offending box was recovered, and an all clear had been entered into the computer system before production could resume. The company paid through the nose, but was ultimately pleased with their failsafe, and the engineers patted each other on the back. A few months passed, and the engineers returned to quality control. The toothpaste company reported zero margin of error for weeks. Turns out one of the minimum wage hairnet types on the assembly line didn't appreciate the sound of klaxons or working with computers. So he or she aimed a large fan at the production line before the scale that blew the lighter, empty cartons off of the conveyor belt. Problem solved. Story 13. When I worked at an inpatient unit, one of the tasks we'd get would be to do a check-in with every patient. There were about 100 when we were full. Nobody wanted that task. It would usually get spit up. Except this one guy who was pretty lazy always wanted it, and I didn't understand it because he was lazy. Finally, one day I was walking out for a break and I figured out what he did. He plopped himself right beside the food line door and wouldn't let people go in until they did their check-in with him. That's not how it was supposed to be done. It was supposed to be a change for clients to connect with staff. But he'd get it done in an hour or so for the whole unit and be done for the day. And yes, it was in a mental health facility. This wasn't to assess self-ending thoughts. That was a separate task in which people were given as much privacy as possible during morning meds. You sign something when you enter a group treatment center that says you understand that it's group treatment and confidentiality is limited. Story 14. Got hired into a plant that just got a big new job building stuff for the military. My job was a materials associate, which basically meant I drove a forklift and staged parts that were built. The engineers came up with a floor plan for all the parts and where they needed to be staged. They used fancy lasers and measuring devices and built it all in CAD. After telling them it wouldn't work, they said, well, let's see you do a better job. I organized the entire 50,000 square foot warehouse so that each part was close to the machines that used them. It followed the first in, first out method, and each department knew where their parts went when they were done making them, put up signs and whatnot. After that, my job was basically pointless because the warehouse ran itself. I decided to teach myself how to use the welding robots in my downtime. Fast forward 3 years, and now I'm an automation engineer at one of the largest parts suppliers in the industry. P.S. Robots are very easy to learn and operate if you're struggling to find what you want to do in your career. Places are hiring with minimal experience too, because there's a huge lack of people in the automation field. Get a 1-year college certification in mechatronics, and you can make around $40,000 to $60,000 starting depending on location. Story 15. Back when I was a cashier at Borders, we had to keep a certain percentage of Borders rewards transactions. I was good at my job and was able to get it in the high 80s, low 90s every month by being a good salesman and convincing them to get it. There was another guy I worked with that had an insanely high percentage, and I didn't understand how he did it. We later came to find out that he would just swipe a card and put it into people's bags without saying anything about it. He got caught and was given a warning and put on probation instead of being fired for cheating. Fast forward about a month and I find that he's getting promoted to work on floor with all the movies and music. I could not believe they promoted him after all that crap and looked me over, someone that was actually a hard worker that did a really good job, and often would have people compliment me to my managers. Then again, the management there was crap. I eventually got fired from there because the guy covering for me while I was on vacation got fired and they somehow expected me to know and come in. Story 16. In high school, I had an absolute jerk of a teacher. He gave me a binder that had the name, address, phone of every student in the entire district, including the names of all their siblings. I was to type this in, even though it was already printed out. I asked if it was already printed. Why was I typing it? He said they paid an outside firm a bunch of money to do it, but the state pulled the funding and the firm refused to provide the files, and now the district didn't have the money to do it again, but they still needed the data. I was super pissed about how tedious of a job I was given and complained to no end. He knew that I was the winner of a typing contest and agreed that this one project would be my entire grade for the semester. If I could manage to get it all entered into the computer by the end of the year, I'd get a passing grade. If not, I'd fail. After about 2 hours of data entry, I decided it was a BS job and downloaded OCR software, scanned the whole thing in, and spent a day or two correcting scanning mistakes. My plan was to spend the rest of the semester goofing off and pretending to work. That lasted about a week before the teacher caught on. He then proceeded to start giving me more stupid, tedious work and said the previous deal was now off. I found out that part of the reason the deal with the consulting firm ended badly was his fault and told him I was going to the school board with this information. We decided on a new plan. My grade for the semester would pass as an A, but I had free time to take on other classes the teacher offered. I used this free time to complete 1.5 other courses. We decided on a new plan. The moment where my slight grin changed to a satisfied smirk, playing freaking hardball. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What is common knowledge at your job that is mind-blowing to normal people? Story 4 will blow your mind. See you in that video.